A very good evening, Zimbabwe. You are listening to Studio 7 from the Voice of America on Wednesday, February 11th, 2015. And this is Live Talk. I'm Blessing Zulu.
And I'm Kip Stube.
And tonight on Live Talk, we are going to talk about sport fines.
To join the discussion, phone us directly at this number 001-202-619-2077 and we'll call you back.
And as usual, Live Talk goes out to Zimbabwe on our 919 medium wave frequency and on the 4930, 5940 and 15455 kilohertz shortwave, Monday through Friday at 8:30 p.m.
On the internet, you can find us at www.voazimbabwe.com, www.voashona.com, and www.voindebele.com.
Generally, I agree with the judge because for any matter where you are going to impose a fine, if there is a dispute by the person against whom you want to impose a fine, then the matter has to be properly tried before a decision can be made based on evidence. Kana usi mutongo wapiwa mudare kuti mugone kutorera munhu mari iye kana achifunga kuti mosha muri kumupomera ari kuiramba, kana achifunga kuti mukada kutora property yake imota yake iye achifunga kuti no zvamuri kumuti akanganisa haasi kubvumirana nazvo. Zvakureva kuti mapurisa akuita inonzi prosecutor woita judge wobva waita executioner kuti uri kutonga nyaya iwe uri suppose kunga uri mupfakazi chete.
Ngivumelana laye kakhulu ujaji ngoba eZimbabwe lapha kasilawo umthetho othi ubhadale imali ku-sports fine. Into eyenzakalayo ukuthi nxa amapholisa athe akumisa emgwaqweni abona ukuthi ulecala.
Once again, thanks for joining us, and you are listening to Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are going to talk about police sport fines.
High Court Judge Justice Francis Bere has provoked a heated debate after remarking that police sports fines at roadblocks are unconstitutional, opening floodgates for a lawsuit.
But police spokesman Paul Nyanti and Information Minister Jonathan Moyo came out guns blazing, attacking Bere for those remarks. But of course, some lawyers are supporting the stance that the judge has taken. Gibbs.
What are your views on this issue? If you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number, 001-202-619-2077, and we'll call you back. That number again, 001-202-619-2077. You can also send us a message on WhatsApp. Our number is 1-202-465-0318.
Onguka Gibbs nasi tinotinge tichitarisa nenyaya yanetsa munyika yekuti vanhu varenge vachityaira motokari dzavo vanofanira here kubhadhara mari yefind pama roadblocks pavanenge vamiswa. Mutongi wedare Justice Francis Bere vachitaura ivo kumasvingo nemusi wemuvhuro vakati ivo zviri kuitwa nemapurisa zvinenge zvisiri pamutemo. Asi uyu toda kuti vanhu vabva vaziva kuti wanga wasiri mutongo wavaipa, asi kuti vakataura mashoko aya vachivhura dare kana kuti kuparura kutanga kwedare kana kuti opening of the high court kumasvingo ikokoko. Vakati aiwa zviri kuitwa nemapurisa asi pamutemo, asi vasati vatombogara pasi nekugara pasi, mapurisa akabva aburitsawo ivo gwaro kuvatori venhau kana kuti statement vachiti ivo Justice Bere vanenge varesva, uye kutaura kwavo pavataura pacho anga isiri nzvimbo yekuti vangakwanisa kunge vachitaura ipapo. Asi mamwe magweta ari kubuda achiti aiwa vari kutsigira zvakataurwa naJustice Bere zvekuti mapurisa anofanira kupa vanhu mukana kana kuti mazuva manomwe ekuti enda unobhadhara mari yako yefind. Kana usingatenderani nefind yacho unokwanisa kuti uende kumatare, matare ozonzwa nyaya yako. Ndo nyaya iri mudariro nhasi Gibbs.
Uyaibeka kuhle ke indaba yethu Blessing namhlanje lamhlukuthi sikhangela khona kukhulunywe Justice Francis Bere. Ubekhuluma esemaswingo khona ngale kuvulwa ke okuyayenziwa lo nyaka ke ku High Court esingathi khona imaswingo High Court circuit. So ekhuluma nje khona ngale njengoba kusitsho ke Blessing. Ukubeke sobala ukuthi lapho ukhuluma sithi akho emthethweni. Kodwa ekhuluma nje kade ungasosinqumo sekuthi idale le High Court yile lichoyo khonokho. So bekhulumela nje ukuthi ethi hayi bathokozwa amapolisa ayisikho emthethweni. kodwa kumangaliseyo kakhulu ukuthi amapholisa ahle athi phezu kwakhe athi no lapho akukhulumayo uyasikhulumela umnumzana ube ezigwejisela labanye bakhe so wasekhuluma khona ngale lo mnumzana ke uJonathan Moyo yena ukhangele kuzokhitshwa kwembiko eZimbabwe ula ungena kulolo daba wathi okhulunywa ngubele ungazani uyasikhulumela so ke sifuna ukuzwa ngoZulu ukuthi kambe lithini ngakhona ukuthiwa ngama-sport fine sizokuthiwa nxa lidlula khona lapho kuma-road block uyamiswa kuthiwa bhatala imali khona manje bakubamba bekuchibilikise bathi khipha imali ndoda.
Of course, there are messages on WhatsApp. Let's start with those. We have Innocent who says, obviously, the police will not adhere to that constitutional obligation since they illegally take money from motorists. Farai says, police are corrupt. That's why they don't want to comply with the constitution. My name is Israel Moyo. Regarding sport fines, the judiciary has played its role by educating the masses, and it's now up to the people to stand up for their rights. I would expect the police to comply, as this is their major revenue stream, both officially and corruptly. And he goes on to say the police have no alternative but to raise money for their operations from these roadblocks. The government actually legalized the police to use a certain percentage of the money they collect as fines for their operations. So what they are doing is actually fundraising, and no sane person should blame them. It's actually unlawful, however, it has been legalized. Very interesting because I think some people are actually saying that what they are seeing at these roadblocks are that there are incidents where the police are pocketing that money and as a result this is actually promoting corruption, Gibbs.
Yes, we've got some messages too on Facebook. One of the messages is from Missile Charles Mazorote, who writes, Justice Bere is very, very correct on this issue. Then I've got Mokwena Daniels, who writes, this is a good judgment. In fact, to Mr. Daniels, it was a statement that was made by the justice. So now he went further to say, traffic offenders must be issued with the receipts of the fines so that they can go pay at any traffic department offices. If the police take the money from motorists and put it in their pockets, that is theft, and those policemen must face the law. I think we've got our case, right?
Yes, and we have our first guest, that is Honorable Jessie Majome, MP for Harare West, and she is also a lawyer by profession. Honorable Majome, good evening.
Good evening, Blessing.
Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe Gibbs, you can start the ball rolling.
Yes, what is your take on these remarks by Justice Bere? Honorable Majome?
Justice Bere's remarks are a breath of fresh air in a very stuffy environment where we are choking with the fumes of, just the strangling of the rule of law, and also an attack on the Constitution itself, on the rule of law, as well as the doctrine of separation of powers in democracy, which separation of powers requires that, each of the three, that the legislature makes the law, the judiciary interprets the law, and the executive executes the law, and the executive uses arms like the police to do so. So Justice Bere's remarks they're so refreshing that, finally there's hope for Zimbabwe, for the long-suffering public, and for the restoration of the rule of law. And I say this because what the police has been doing has been long been unconstitutional, not only illegal, but also even unconstitutional. But the public in Zimbabwe is cowed. We actually have a rogue police force, which should no longer be a force, but should now be a police service. And so, it's high time somebody told that police, brought them, reined them in. In Shona we would say, this is important. And I think that what Justice Bere has done is actually even showing symptoms of two things. We have no attorney general in this country. The president has failed to appoint an attorney general who is the chief legal advisor to government. You see, that's a very important topic. If we had an attorney general and an attorney general's office that works, it would actually be advising all these various government departments, especially the police, what the law provides. The law makes it's unlawful for them to collect sport fines. And further, if we had an attorney general and an attorney general's office that functions and gives advice, they would also advise the police and teach them about what their role is. In this particular case, the police officer who spoke is totally out of line. He has no clue whatsoever what the police are meant for. The police are, you can't, there's nothing like a personal opinion of the judge. Mm-hmm. The judge is a member of the judiciary. The Constitution provides clearly in Section 163 that the judiciary consists of the Chief Justice, the Deputy Chief Justice, and the other judges of the Constitutional Court. The judge, when a judge speaks, and especially at such a public function, he is espousing the law, he's the authority, and the Constitution is the one that gives the judges the prerogative to interpret the law. A police officer is a mere paralegal in the scheme of things, whose role is simply to do the donkey work of enforcing the law that Parliament makes and that the judiciary interprets. I mean, it's like a clinic orderly who wants to tell a surgeon, that they shouldn't, that they shouldn't operate. It doesn't work like that. It's totally out of line. And this we better, it's a good thing that Justice Bailey said that. I think this police officer must be taken to book. What is done is contempt of court, and I think he must actually also be charged. And also, I think this matter needs to also even be decided in the Constitutional Court and ruled that it's unconstitutional. The police must stop doing this. He can get the judgment that he wants, but he has no respect for the judiciary, and that is contempt of the courts, and that should actually be punishable.
Thank you, Honorable Majome. Please do stay on the line. Gibbs, we have our second guest, right?
Yes, we've got Mr. Pulu, who is a human rights lawyer. I think you can proceed and talk to him.
Maybe, Mr. Pulu, talking about, of course, this is not a judgment, but these are remarks that were made by Justice Bere. Honorable Majome has talked about the Constitutional Court. What can Zimbabweans do to take that matter to the Constitutional Court so that there's clarity on this issue?
Yes, I think that, this is a very simple issue. And perhaps the starting point is not even to go to the Constitutional Court itself. In terms of the legislation governing these fines are not supposed to be paid on the spot. Unless I decide as the offender that I'm able to pay on the spot, and that in fact I want to pay the fine. Because remember, everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. If you look at that fine, it's called an admission of guilt fine. So it means once you are saying I must pay the fine, you are asking me to admit guilt. Now, there is no police officer on the road who can use force or compel me to admit guilt. So I have the option. If he wants, to charge me with the offence, and I don't agree that I should pay a fine because I didn't commit the offence, he must write a ticket for me. That ticket is actually a summons. If you look at it, they don't have them these days. They don't even have them at the roadblock. But that ticket is actually a summons. It summons you. It asks you to pay the fine if you are admitting guilt, or, if you don't want to pay the fine, appear in court on such and such a day. This is what is supposed to happen. So when the police compel me to pay a fine, this is unconstitutional because they are denying you of your right to be held. They are breaching the presumption of innocence. And so they'll be flying against the legislation governing those tickets itself. So certainly, if that happens to you, you can approach the High Court, to have that ticket set aside. And in fact, there's also a further procedure that is provided for in the law. Once the police officer issues a ticket to you and you pay, that ticket must go to a magistrate who must confirm that ticket. And the police are not doing that. They have not been doing it for a long time. I remember, I did a case for Jenny Williams versus the Attorney General and another at the High Court. And that was the issue. I mean, this was over 10 years ago. A ruling on those kind of things has already been made. To say that once a ticket is issued, it must be confirmed by a magistrate within a given time frame. So certainly, if they approach the High Court, or when the ticket, or alternatively, if it goes to a magistrate, the magistrate will not confirm it. So they can approach the High Court to review the conduct of the police officers. You can also approach the High Court to raise the constitutional issue. Alternatively, you can go directly to the Constitutional Court if you want. But certainly, members of the public must be courageous enough and have the time to come forward and be prepared to foot the bill for the point of principle and take the matter to court. I have no doubt that it won't take a judge. Any judge won't have second thoughts in granting an order and condemning that the behavior of the police.
Thank you, Mr. Pulu. For those of you who are just joining us tonight on Studio 7 Live Talk, we are talking about spot fines. Of course, the American system works like this, Gibbs. If you violate traffic laws, you are stopped by a police officer, he gives you a ticket, and you are given at least a month to pay. If you don't pay within a month, it can double. And alternatively, you can go to the courts and contest that ticket. No spot fines.
That's it. Exactly, yes. Silapha mnumzana lapha abasecingweni okuqala ke ngumnumzana Nqobani Emo. Baba Nqobani kunjani lusaka? Hayi siyaphila kakhulu. Sondele efonini sibili ungayifaki ku speaker phone. Usondele buduzana.
Okay, ngicabanga
hayi ifake endlebeni sibili ngoba uyasilimaza siyabe singasakuzwa kuhle
angizokuzwa mshoka okay maybe
ya isondeze futhi ikhiphe ku speaker phone. Aha,
okay kunjani manje?
ya so kulungile kakhulu. So uthini ngodaba lolu baba Nqobani?
Yabona udaba lwamapholisa futhi eZimbabwe lungaphezulu kwendaba ye-sport fine. Ngoba abantu eZimbabwe bathele nzima impela ngamapholisa. Amapholisa aseyinkinga ukudlula otsotsi. Yibo otsotsi abakhulu aseberobha abantu begqoke uniform emgwaqweni. Fair. Yikho ubona nje ma ujaji ekhulumele enkulumo ayikhulumileyo. Uvele kusuke wonke umuntu seziphikisana lalokho. Okuyisimanga yikuthi abantu abanjengoJonathan Moyo esikhangelele ukuthi ngabantu abamele bavikele abantu. Basupport into enjengaleyo ngoba udaba lwe-sport fine ilona oludala i-corruption. eZimbabwe sokungani kulicala ukuthi umuntu ahambe ngalamali ebhokesini. And then uzothola amapholisa bakufoze bathi bhatala ifine. Uthola ulayo imali efika kuleyo mali abayiphetheyo. And then bazothi le mali utsho leyo mali layo bavele bayithathe bangakunikeza itiketi usukuhamba. Yinto abayazi and then into enjengaleyo abantu beZimbabwe kumele bayiripote kubani uma abantu abanjengaboJonathan beyisupport into enjengaleyo. And ma bengamisa ngempela udiko lwe-sport fine i-corruption yamapholisa ingaphela eZimbabwe. Ngoba kulapho kulenkinga khona i-government siyaza ila mali yokukhulisa amapholisa ibavulele maybe iyabavumela ukuthi benze le corruption ukuze bathole imali yokuthi maybe bangacomplain. Wathi inkinga abantu beZimbabwe bathwele nzima ngamapholisa emgwaqweni. Amapholisa amayevuka avukele emgwaqweni and uthola lamapholisa othi akazi ukuthi uzokubuza athina akumise nje emoto yathi ngifuna amaphepha uthi iphepha lana athi amaphepha. Ucela ungazi ukuthi ufunani. Ma umnikeza iphepha athi hayi leli umnikezeli yathi hayi leli uzomnikezeli yathi okay lona leli. Then uyabona abantu abazizwe ngetraffic i-police camp A1 yadivide amapholisa maybe babe yi-4 abanye bame njengala abanye bame njengala abanye bame njengala. Ma usuka kulapho siya kulaphana uzohamba bakuthi laba kubhadalisile lapha ngizobhadala lapha ngizobhadala. Abantu beZimbabwe benzeni baripote kubani ngoba kumele kuripote khona emapholiseni and amapholisa amothakele lezwe. Abantu abangamaminista njengaboJonathan Moyo bathi kulungile. Mina lo jaji into ayikhulumileyo angifisa wonke umuntu eZimbabwe asukume ame laye ngoba challenge.
Hayi sikuzwile kakhulu ke mnumzana Nqobani ungadinwa kusasa kunapho ke eZambia.
Okay.
So according to Mr. Nqobani Blessing, this is the roadblocks where every policeman is here and there are money spinners for the ZRP, So he says this is the root cause of corruption among the police force. And then he went to the extent of saying police are now worse than common criminals, because they are the ones that are now giving people a hard time instead of, Tsotsis and other people. So then he says, what is really hitting him hard is that Mr. Jonathan Moyo, who is the information minister, is actually supporting this kind of thing. And police are actually defending that those spot fines. So he says, there's a lot that is happening. Because at times, these policemen don't have even some receipt books.
Yeah.
They even ask you, if they say, okay, pay about $40, and you say, I don't have it. They say, okay, how much do you have? After paying it, you drive away because they don't receipt anything. So he says this is very problematic. Sike sibone njalo ke sinomnumzana uzibusiso eJozi. Baba Zibusiso kunjani? Khulumela phezulu mnumzana, abantu bathe nxe usanda ukubhadala phela isport fine mnumzana. Ubhadele emgwaqweni. Akutsho sizwe baba ungathini?
Hayi baba uDube yona lento ekhulunywa nguye ubaba lo oqeda kuphuma. Mina kwakubona kwami ngicabanga ukuthi mhlawumbe bakhona abantu mhlawumbe abakhulu lapha abahlale abaphethe kwezama police station. Kusho ukuthi bayabavulela laba bafana bethi madoda hambani lokwenza imali emgwaqweni thina nisiphathele imali engaka. Ngoba okokuqala vele abakubuzi bona, babuza yona indaba yamaphepha ukuthi amaphepha emoto. Njalo futhi laloba nje imoto ingabe iphelele kahle abachekile lawo maphepha, abafuna imali. Ngokokuqala ukuthi ukhupha imali. And ukusuka nje from khona phela eBlawayo usiyafika eLupane, uyathola ukuthi uhamba ama-roadblock, uvala ama-roadblock angafika 7 kuzo zonke lezo ndawo uchiya imali. Uchiya imali kunjalo imoto thothi ayilungele ukuthi ihambe emgwaqweni, kodwa bayayidlulisa kunjalo bese sekusifa abantu. So Jonathan vele angeke sisho ukuthi ngoba vele abanandaba nempilo zabantu, babheke amaphakethe abo. Plus amaphoyisa ayalamba, awaholi. Okwesibili, laloba mhlawumbe uphethe nje i-cold drink bayayifuna bethi hayi sinike sithikela mhlawumbe 2 liter ye-cold drink. Manje le into ayingeke iziphele. Lalo baba kade ekhuluma akukho kuya phambili ongakwenza ngoba vele amalungelo abantu abawanazi. So kungaze kukhulunywe kunjalo, ayikho nje mhlawumbe into ezoshintsha ngoba izinto nje zonke vele zimoshakele elizweni, kodwa-ke wonke umuntu uyakubona. Ungaze bethi mhlawumbe kube nabantu abathi baprotesta babuye bashawe futhi lawo amaphoyisa. Kusho ukuthi nje vele okukhulunywa ngabantu akusebenzi. So angazi mina izwe lingalunga kanjani.
Hayi siyakuzwa kakhulu ke nomzana Sibusiso khona lapho ke eJozi. Sibongile kakhulu baba. Yes, sibongile. So according to Mr. Sibusiso, he says even if your car is perfect, you have to pay something in Zimbabwe, along the roads. So he says between Bulawayo and Lupane, there are many roadblocks, and at every roadblock you have to pay something. If you are carrying a mineral drink, they want that Coke from you. So he says now people don't know what to do. I think this is something else.
Tidzoke kuna Honorable Majome. Honorable Majome, asi gurukota rinoona nezvemukati menyika vaKembo Mohadhi vakambonetsana navabiti nenyaya yemari idzodzidzi. Vakati ivo aiwa zvemasport fines zvavangaregedze nenyaya yekuti vari kuti hurumende haisi kupa mapurisa mari dzakakwana. Nekudaro idzodzi mari ndo dzinobatsira kuita mabasa emapurisa.
Mufunge munyika muno hamuna mutemo zvechokwadi. Zvinonyadzisa chaizvo kuti gurukota rehurumende rinotonyatsotaura richitsinira kuchikorwa kwemutemo munyika. Zvakaipa fani nekuti imodzwa nyika ino inoda kuti ichingodzoserwa kumutemo. Ivo mapurisa mufunge havatonyari. Ndakakatyamadzwa zvikuru kuchipiwa ndingati report nekomiti yekuparliament inoona nezvehome affairs nezvemapurisa vachiongorora budget regore rakapera. Vakati vakaona ivo kuti mapurisa havana kupiwa mari yekugadzira makambani nezvakadaro, asi vakakwanisa kuzadzikisa zvinhu zvese zvavaifanira kuita. Saka zvinoda kuti mubvunzo ndewekuti mari iyi vakaiwana kupi, uyezve patinoita budget renyika hapataurwi chokwadi. Inoti minista wefinance vachinamasa zvinoreva kuti pavanouya kuzotiudza kuti honai homwe yehurumende yakakura zvakadi, vanenge vachitinyepera nekuti havatombotitauriri zvachose, hatitomboudzwi nezveimwe homwe dzinoita zvokufukurwa nemapurisa idzi. Ende vari kunyatsogadzira uwo rinoti mari idzi hatizivikanwi kuti dzinotorwa nani. Sezvambotaura nevamwe vatauri kuti hatina marisiti, hadzimbozivikanwi kuti dzinoenda kupi. Chokwadi vari kushandisa mutemo kufumura chaiko mutemo kuti vaite zvinhu zvisakarurama. Zvakaipa fanje zvinhu zvinofanira kuti zviimiswe, asi zvinongoda kuti ivo vana veZimbabwe vazvimirire, nekuti pane mutemo uripo. Mapurisa haasiriwo vanofanira kuchengetedza mutemo, asi ndivo vari kuutya. Zvakuda kuti vana veZimbabwe vachitora mutemo uyu vachiuchengetedza ivo, tiratidze mapurisa unubu hwavari kuita huperewo, nekuti zvavari kuita hasina kana ndingati ruremekedzwa nematare edzimosha. Zvatosvika panotyisa izvi, hazvichatomboiti, zvinonyadzisa zvikuru. Zvinoda kuti sezvataura navapuli zviendeswe kumatare zviongororwe. Asi zvakare inini ndine chinango, inini ndinongofunga kuti mupurisa uyu anofanira kudzidziswa kuti mutemo unomboti kudii. Anofanira kudzokera kudhepo chaiko andodzidza kuti basa remapurisa nderekuita kudii, uyezve majaji nderekuita kudii. Havachatozivi zvachose. Rinonzi rerera, rinonzi zundu raakutoti iro ndiro rave mombe apa ndijaji, haasi mapurisa, izundu iri harichatombozivi kuti rakatarisa kupi. Zvinofanira kupera izvi.
Aiwa, tinotenda Honorable Majobe. Rega timbozwe kuti vanhu vari kuti kudii. Mukoma Joseph Dliwayo, munoti kudii nenyaya yekubhadharisa vanhu faindi pamaroadblock?
Baba, kana tiri sesu tinogara kuno kujoni kuno kuti tiri munhamo baba. Nekuti zvinezvi kana tikange tichibva kuno kuSouth Africa tichienda kumusha uko neroad yeBeit Bridge, handifungi kuti kumakembi chaiwo kuZimbabwe chikubva kuHarare kuchine vanhu vanenge vachigara mumakembi, kana kuenda kunosunga vanhu vanopara mhosva kumwe kunze kwokugarira vanhu murodhi vane mota chena. Saka hatitombozivi kuti mutemoyo wakauya nebumbiro nyowani here, kana kuti mutemo wemapurisa waari kujaja pachawo, nokuti iye zvinezvi mukatarisa nevamwe vanhu vanenge vachigarira murodhi, mapurisa haatombozivira kana kuti mota yacho inodhiraivhwa yakatarisa kupi, but anongosvika pakupanisha kuti anogona kungokumisa murodhi. Akumisa murodhi ukamupindura mibvunzo yaunenge wamupindura akashayiwa kuti anokupa mhosva ipi, unogona kumiswa padivi perodhi kana awa rese wakangomira apa, wabva uchidhiraivha usiku hwose uine hope, woshayiwa kuti chandiri kumisirwa pano ndechipi, achingotsvaga chete kuti ndipe chioko muhomwe. Saka zvinotirwazva kuti handizivi kuti mutemo wacho wataiziva kudhara semaziviro ataita kuti mapurisa aimira murodhi, aitoti chero akasvikawo pauri unenge uchiremekedzekawo kuti uri munhu une kodzero dzokuti unofanirwa kudayirawo zvinoenderana nokuti wabatwa uine mhosva here pamota yako, kana kuti hauna kubatwa uine mhosva. Kana wakatosangana newe uine chitambi sezvatakaita, havatokufariri, vanofarira vasina zvitambi, vanodzisa zioko muhomwe.
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru mukoma Joseph. Aiwa, tinotenda. Of course, what Joseph is saying is you know, there are too many roadblocks on the Harare to Beitbridge road, and he is saying that there is too much corruption. You know, the police, according to him, they actually do not like people who have licenses, because it means they cannot pay them bribes. But of course, it's bitter that you know, this sport fine business is actually promoting a lot of corruption on the roads. Tinamukoma George, makadi mukoma George.
Zvofara no makadiwo ngoma jonga.
Aiwa, ndimukoma Blessings.
Orari baza.
Aiwa, tiri nani zvedu, but ndoda kuti murambe makabata mukoma George, tichataura nemitimbo turaka break, but also we want to thank Honorable Majome. Of course, she was just joining us for the first half of the show. Honorable Majome, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Pulu, please do stay on the line. And for our radio listeners, unfortunately, it ends here. But the good news is we are streaming live. So go to www.voazimbabwe.com and press on LiveTalk. This is Blessing Zulu.
And don't forget that LiveTalk is on YouTube. Just visit us on YouTube. This is Kip Skube in Washington, D.C. Stay tuned.
Once again, thanks for joining us, and this is Studio 7 Live Talk. And tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about spot fines at police roadblocks. Of course, Justice Francis Bere made some remarks in Masvingo saying that what members of the police are doing is actually unconstitutional. People must be given at least a grace period, say a week, 7 days, to be able to pay their fines, or alternatively go and seek recourse in the country's courts. But of course, members of the police, or rather the police spokesperson, Chief Superintendent Paul Nyati, said the police were not going to backpedal or backtrack on this issue. They will continue to press members of the public to pay public fines. And he went on to say whatever Justice Bere is quoted as having said were just his own remarks. Those were his personal views, and they were not going to influence what members of the police were going to do. Gibbs.
And apparently, Blessing, it appears as if there is a judgment that was made in the High Court of Zimbabwe sometime between June 2012 and August 2012. It was, Zan Papage versus the state. And it was a case of this 27-year-old man who was actually driving while speaking on the phone. So, but when the judgment was made by Justice Cheddar, here is what he said. He said, for the avoidance of doubt, the following is the correct legal position which should be followed by the relevant authorities. Is point 4, yet in point form, right? So one of the points, which was number 4, says a police officer cannot and should not insist on a spot fine on the basis that he is not in possession of a ticket book, which ticket book is a necessary administrative tool for executing his duties. A police officer's failure to carry relevant stationery cannot be used to curb and or infringe people's rights. I think this judgment means a lot, right?
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
So if you wish
Very
to,
revealing.
if you wish to join the show right now, phone us directly at this number 001-202-619-2077. That number again is 001-202-619-2077. Yes, kubeka bembona ngazani kulomnumzana George.
Tina Mkoma George taurai tinzwe nenyaya yemasport
Mkoma
fine.
Blessing isusu tinokrosa mabhodha isusu. Nerimwe zuva ndakatakura mupurisa weZRP nina akanditaurira nenyaya yemasport fine iyoyi. Haisi yakabviswa zvokwadi Mkoma nekuti vakataura ivo kuti izvo idirective inobva kumusoro. Sekuona kwatakaita kuti izvo gavhena vakabviswa vagono. Inhau yekuti hakusisina fandi inokwanisa kufanda musangano. Izvo akanyatsotaura akati iyo imari yatakatonzi munotofanira kuya nayo kukamba makabata mari mukaregera vanotopinda mudambudziko varume vaya. Saka isusu tinokrosa bhodha, unototi ukasvika uine tai kunyange richiri right, kunyange zvakaita sei, panotodiwa $10 yaunotobvisa whether you like it or not. Iye zve zvatopa kuti matransporters mazhinji chaiwo anobva kuSouth Africa kuno kwachienda kuZimbabwe achipfuura achienda kuZambia tochicha ruto akutoshandisa ruto yekuenda nekuBotswana isingatombotsika muZimbabwe nekuda kwemapurisa. Izvozvi pane mapurisa akazungula taakutoribedza kuti toge. Unotowana kuti wenda wakabata $10 iyo usina kunyange wakapiwa tiketi uchienda uchidzoka unotopiwa tiketi semhosva iyo. Saka hazvimbofa zvakachinja. Vanhu ivava ndo marezi vari kutoita mari. Saka idambudziko ratitaura naro munyika harigadzirike. Hatichatombofa takazvigona. Musangano hausisina mari, hakusina kwauchaona mari. Iye zvino vari kukanganwa kuti vanoda kutambirisa vanhu. Revenue inouya pakupinda unenge uchiita motikari idzo dzezvibhadhara zvichidii. Iye zvezvo haichakwanisa kubatika nekuti motikari dzakawanda dzatiza. Zvichabatsirei kunyika kwedu? Ndo dambudziko ratinaro. Hazvichinje zviya zvokuti hanzi masport fine vanotoada kana daiti vanhu vakada kuramba kadai mukaprotest. Imari yemusangano irikuenda kumusangano. Ndakuda kutsvaga kuti hanzi hazviite ndosaka maona dzingini assistant general varamba. Hakusina kumwa kwavachaona mari, ndo mari dzacho dziri kutouya idzodzo. Ndo dambudziko ratinaro.
Aiwa, tinotenda zvikuru Mkoma George.
Ndatenda hangu Ngoma.
George is saying that there are certain roadblocks where you have to pay something, whether you like it or not. So they've actually nicknamed them toll gates. So it's like a toll gate. You know, for the toll gate, you can't say, I'll pay you tomorrow, hey, give me a ticket. You just have to pay. So there are such roadblocks that are toll gates. Mr. Pulu. Mr. Pulu?
Yes.
Yes. What is your take on these remarks? I think George is actually resigned to the fact that nothing is going to be done.
The public transport sector now call those roadblocks toll gates. Because whether you like it or not, you have to pay, even if it means manufacturing. The police will manufacture offenses for you. Certainly, they let you pay illegal sport fines. Because those sport fines are illegal. As you've pointed out in the Babbage case by Cheddar J here in the High Court, you can see Justice Bero was citing a case that is in existence. And the Jenny Williams case that I've also referred to you also deals with those aspects. Certainly, there's no debate in this country. There should be no debate whether this is illegal behavior or not. But it's simply a sign of the impunity that we have in our country, where any regime that is on its knees usually before it really comes clattering down, it begins to oppress the ordinary people by heavily taxing them and stealing from them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pulu. And Gibbs, I think we have our second guest, that is former Senator David Coulthard, and is also the former Education Minister. He is also a lawyer by profession. Gibbs.
Mr. Coulthard, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening. It's good being with you.
Oh, it's good to talk to you once again. So we saw your post on Facebook and you cited this case, Babbage versus the state. And it appears as if there's a precedent law in that kind of ruling that was made by Justice Cheddar. Give us your take on that kind of thing, on sport fines.
Well, precisely. Both the ZRP and Jonathan Moyer have been saying that Judge Berry is wrong because it wasn't a judgment, that he was just making remarks at the opening of the court in Masvingo. And to that extent, they are correct. But, of course, they very conveniently ignore two things. Firstly, this Babbage judgment of Justice Cheddar, which makes it very clear that spot fines can't be enforced. They selectively ignore that. And then, perhaps more significantly, they ignore the provisions of Section 69(1) and Section 71 of the Constitution. Section 69, subsection 1 says every person accused of an offence has the right to a fair and public trial within a reasonable time before an independent and impartial court. And Section 70, subsection 1 says any person accused of an offence has the following rights, including to be presumed innocent until proved guilty. Not proved guilty by a policeman, but by a court. Now, what these constitutional provisions say, and they're very clear, no one can argue around it, is that every person, if they're charged with an offence, has the right, if they want to defend a matter, to have that case determined by a court. Now, the police are not the judiciary. They're not courts. And a fine is a penalty. A fine is an admission of guilt that you have committed an offence. If a motorist wants to consent to pay the fine, that's another matter entirely. Yes, they can pay a spot fine by consent, but they cannot, in terms of the Constitution, in terms of the Babbage judgment, be forced by the police to pay a spot fine.
So can we assume here, Mr. Coulthard, that maybe Mr. Jonathan Moyo and the police are in contempt of court because there's some precedent law here?
Well, I think that's pushing it because the comments are not inflammatory. They're more made out of ignorance than out of malice. So I don't think that they're in contempt. But certainly if they continue to flagrantly ignore the dictates of the Constitution and the Babbage judgment, then they are acting illegally and could be, subject, in theory at least, to criminal sanction because they're breaking the law.
Thank you so much, Mr. Coltart. I liked it when he said you are presumed innocent, but in Zimbabwe the arrests are a solution in search of a problem.
You're trying to right on side. It's very important to think about what's happening at these roadblocks.
Yeah.
People are being forced. They're not allowed to go further in their journey. They are threatened.
The cars are impounded in some cases.
30, 40 minutes. It's outrageous.
I think we've got a caller on the line, and that is Mr. Tlachayo. Mr. Tlachayo, good evening and welcome to the program.
Hello, sir.
Hi, sir. How are you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Tlachayo. How is him?
Right. Him is okay. You see, the problem we're having here is this unlawful act was legalized by government. The police was allowed to take part of the deposit fines that they collect to fund their operations. Now, where do the police get the money? They know the only place where they get the money are the roads. The police now go to the roads. They have two different receipt books. There is a receipt book that takes the money to police general headquarters. There is a receipt book that takes money to the court. So what do the police do? They take more money to the police headquarters, and this is open to corruption. You cannot have revenue that is collected using two receipt books. Revenue is collected using one receipt book.
Yes.
And you have to account for that money at the end of the day. Now, he is a man who is under a tree. He is collecting state revenue using two receipt books. He does not have a safe. He's putting the money in his pocket. What does he do? Does he take more money to the state, or he takes more money into his own pocket? The guess is as good as mine. So it's just a thing that was legalized by government, and it's a wrong thing, and it's actually killing the government, but it's actually empowering the police officers on the road. That's why they are all going onto the road, because they know they can make money. They are not wrong because they were legalized to do an unlawful act. That's why they are actually defensive. They were legalized to do it. But it's unlawful. Everybody knows it. Even Jonathan Moyo knows that what the police is doing is unlawful. But it's happening. And no one can stop it.
Is there any solution to that problem, Mr. Tlachayo? Any solution?
The solution is to stop it. It's just to say the police has to be funded from the fiscus like any other government department. They cannot be told to raise their own money to fund their own operations. How do they do that? The police do not produce anything. They are just policemen.
But is it as easy as all that for them to just stop like that?
Hello?
Can they just stop like that if they're told?
No, the government has to reverse its decision. Simple. They have to reverse what they legalized. Because they said the police should raise their money. Part of the fines that they raise, they fund their operations. How do the police raise fines? Obviously, motorists have to pay the fines. So what do? They raise up 2 receipt books at every roadblock. Obviously, they will get more money on their own receipt book that goes to their headquarters instead of the legal receipt that goes to court. That's what they are doing.
I say, thank you very much, Mr. Tlachayo, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Umzulu Tlachayo, mnumzana. Utama police are 2 receipt books, right? Yeah. One earlier headquarters. Elinye la ngona kumele le court kodakala. Kodwa uthi kanti ungahlala ngaphansi kwesihlahla mnumzana. Uyenze ukufunayo uthi uthatha imali kahulumende ngendlela njalo. Akuthi vele lokhu vele akuza kwenzakala kwamanye amazwe ngoba vele akuvunyelwa. So ubona ngazana uhulumende uyakusekela lokhu yikho umnumzana uJonathan Moyo engani usibilika afuna ukuzwa ukuthi kumiswe. So yikho ngani kube khona khonapho. Ngakhuluma lophulu engeke ngakutshela ukuhamba njani.
Coming to you, Mr. Pulu, obviously, I think what many people are saying is it's clear that the government is cash-strapped, and as a result, they don't see any of this issue, any of this being resolved. They are saying there's a remote chance that the police will stop this issue of forcing people to pay sport fines.
Yes, like I mentioned before, I think we've always pointed out that, there's impunity within government ranks, there's impunity within police ranks, there's disregard of court orders, there's disregard of the law and clear procedures, and perhaps they've even forgotten how, basic steps in administering simple legal issues like issuing an admission of guilt fine are supposed to work. They even omit to follow the procedure where those fines must be confirmed in a court of law first before they go through. So certainly I think the root of the matter is the issue of impunity and the terrible policy that has been made by government to say that the police must raise their own revenue. Certainly this is what is inspiring. This is what is, motivating this kind of conduct, and this is a decision clearly that they have to reverse. And certainly, if professors like Jonathan Moyo cannot see that this is a clearly wrong way to do, because I think sometimes some of our government officials confuse the roles they have in their political parties when they are politicking, and roles that they have in an office as a minister of government. And I think it's an abuse of office for a minister of government to even utter such sentiments and try to validate what is clearly illegal. And this is the kind of behavior that is bringing the country to its knees.
Let's bring in Mr. Coulthard. Mr. Coulthard, let me quote what Professor Moyo said. He says, and I quote, "Meanwhile, Justice Bere's premature and misplaced speech has most probably irreparably harmed the prospect of having that test determined in favor of motorists whose jubilation is certain to be short-lived as they face continued grief on the treacherous roads." What is your take on these remarks, that these remarks were premature?
Well, Jonathan Moyo has a problem because those remarks were not premature. They came after the new constitution was brought into law by ZANU-PF, by MBC. Jonathan Moyo should know all about Section 69 and Section 70. And Mr. Justice Berry was simply commenting in light of the constitution and the law as he knows it. If Jonathan Moyo takes the time to study Section 69 and Section 70, he will realize that if anyone challenges this conduct of the police in the courts, they're going to win and government is going to lose, and Jonathan Moyo will have a lot of mud in his face. I understand why he's adopting this position because, sadly, government, because of its very poor economic policies, doesn't have sufficient revenue. And they know that there's a lot of disaffection in the police force. And quite frankly, without the source of revenue, that disaffection within the police force will grow. But the problem that he faces is that this is actually bringing the police into disrepute. You know, we have laws in Zimbabwe which says it is an offense to bring the police, the good name of the police, into disrepute. And ironically, the government policy is doing just that. Instead of paying policemen decent wages, they are forcing policemen to be out in the streets, losing the respect of the public and acting illegally. And that needs to stop.
Thank you so much, Mr. Coulthard. Of course, this whatever is happening in Zimbabwe, you know, you can draw parallels to what was happening in Ferguson, where there were riots here, you know, because the public was not happy. They were saying that the problem with the policing there was that the council tended to rely a lot on the money that was being collected by the police from members of the public through these fines. And in order to fund the council, it ended up being too excessive. And as a result, people were rebelling, and that created a lot of animosity and all those riots that you saw after the shooting to death of Michael Brown. But of course, there were some issues that were that had not been addressed to do with the policing. So when the police are too aggressive when it comes to these sport fines, it creates problems with the public.
That's right. So what we are saying, coincidentally, there's a message that we just received from Mr. Yafet, who says, if people unite and refuse to pay all the money at roadblocks, I think this will help a lot. He says people should refuse to pay this money, and then dockets will be opened, and then people will challenge that kind of, those kind of fines. So at the end of the day, he says this will help in fighting against these sport fines. So Baba Pulu, ubona ngazani abantu bengenzani ukuthi bezama ukunqabela lokho ekwenziwa ngamapolisa?
Abantu balelungelo lokwala ukubhadala i-sport fine. You don't have to pay a sport fine. Nxa indaba kumele iyekhodi bayihambe khona. Njalo amapholisa nxa ngathi ufuna ukubhadalisa wonke umuntu i-sport fine, kumiwe emgwaqweni izimota zobe zime khona phandle. Akusoze kube le-free flow of traffic. Amapholisa kangeke abe nawo amandla le-administration yokuthi balungise indaba enjalo. Ngibona ngani abantu labo bakumelanga bavume kwezinye isikhathi ukubhadala ama-sport fine labo.
Yeah, according to Mr. Pulu, everyone has got a right to refuse to pay the sport fines. So he says that's not a problem. So if they say pay, you say no, I can't pay it now because I don't have the money and other reasons. You see. So now we've got Ubaba Sekongweni, Councillor Michael. Councillor Michael, unjani baba?
Ngiyaphila unjani baba?
Siphilile Councillor Michael, ungaphi lapho?
Yebo.
Ye ukuphi kwangikhona khonapho eZimba?
Ngisemasasa emberengwa baba.
Ye kunjani emberengwa?
Hayi emberengwa sibona ilanga baba elichisayo.
Ye ungathini ke ama-sport fine lawa amaphoyisa?
Ngikutholi kahle.
Ungathini ke ngama-fine lawa amaphoyisa baba?
Ngibambi kahle indaba ekhulumayo baba ingani ya break ifoni yakhona.
Oh ye, so ifoni yakho uyisondeze endlebeni mbijana. Yes, sikhuluma lapha ngama-sport fine. Ama-sport fine ayenziwa ngamaphoyisa emgwaqweni lapha. Ye, uthi uyafayindiswa phela. Ye.
Okay.
Ungathini ngakho?
Hayi mina kangilambono kukho lokho vela into kuvele bona bajayele ukuthi badle emgwaqweni akulokunye singakukhuluma phezulu wakho.
Kuyethusa kuyethusa yini baba?
Kuyethusa kakhulu baba.
Kodwa wena njengoba la utshayela imota uyakubhadala i-sport fine?
Yes, siyake sizibhadale sibili izimali esizibhadalayo sibili kodwa-ke ekukukhuluma kaba kunzima baba ngoba thina vele kakule esingakwenza ngoba ilizwe lethu ngelokuncindezelana.
So yikuphonga uhlala nje kuphela ukuthi akubuye okubuyayo uyazi ufele khonapho?
Ye akubuye okubuyayo sifele khapha ngoba kula ungathi yavusa ikhanda yaganyula.
Akusitshele wena wathi ubhadala i-sport fine yakho bathini? Bakubuza bathini?
Yebo.
But wathi ubhadala yakho i-sport fine bathini kuwe councillor? Kwayangizana inombolo ka-councillor iyahlupha. But what you're saying is that he has paid a sport fine, and he says at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do. So they're just waiting for fate to decide their destiny. And this is very painful, I think.
Indeed. And Mr. Coulthard, there is also a problem of accounting for this money. I understand, like we discussed earlier on in the show, that there was this confrontation between Honorable Biti and Mr. Kembo Mohadi when Mr. Biti was arguing that the money was not being remitted to the treasury. What does the law say about these fines?
Well, the law is very clear. Spot fines, when they are paid, are meant to be referred to a magistrate, and a magistrate, in theory, in terms of the Criminal Procedure and Evidence Act, is meant to see whether an offence has been committed. A magistrate, in theory, has the the right to actually say an offence has not been committed, and the fine is then meant to be returned. But in any case, the fine, in terms of the Criminal Procedure and Evidence Act, is not meant to stay with the police. It's meant to go through the Ministry of Justice to Revenue, to ultimately to the Ministry of Finance. So this procedure where it appears the police are entitled to keep the money whilst it may have been authorized by government, it would appear to be, that aspect alone would appear to be unlawful. But I want to come to another point that you touched on just now, when you referred to Ferguson. What government needs to understand, and Jonathan Moyer in particular, is the level of anger felt amongst the general populace regarding what is going on in these roadblocks. I remember as a minister, whenever I got to a roadblock, I'd just be waved through because I was a minister. In other words, I never became aware as a minister, or I was aware, but I was never subjected to what usual civilians are at these roadblocks, being searched and forced to pay these fines. And unfortunately, Jonathan Moyer is in the same position as that. He doesn't understand, because he's never experienced it himself, what it is like to get in a vehicle, in a taxi, and drive from Bulawayo to Harare. How many roadblocks you have to go through, how long it takes, all the hassles that drivers and others have to encounter, and the fines that have to be paid. And it has bred deep-rooted anger amongst people towards the police and indeed towards the government. And for that reason alone, whether or not the money is coming to the right destination, whether or not the money ends up in the Ministry of Finance, this policy must stop. It is bringing the police into disrepute. It's causing a lot of anger amongst the people. And of course, fundamentally, it is illegal and it is unconstitutional.
Mr. Thank you very much. Mr. Pulu, your last word.
I think I agree entirely with what is being said. Good policing, I mean, at police school, the first thing they learn is that good policing is to be sensitive to the public reaction to the way, how the police are working. So they have to have a gauge on the public mood, and they're failing dismally in that regard. And we hope that someone takes action, and the police bosses who are making these decisions sober up and start to be worried about that aspect of good policing.
Mr. Coltart, maybe also your last word. Some analysts are saying maybe there is need to retrain the police force, because what they are seeing is really bad.
Well, I think retraining is part of it, but it just takes leadership. The Minister of Home Affairs, the Commissioner of Police, needs to restate the law and stop this, and the Minister of Finance needs to find money to make sure that policemen are paid properly so that they don't have to rely on this as a source of income. But I just want to make one final point in closing. One of your contributors said that it doesn't matter what the law says, the police are going to continue doing this. And that is true. Most people don't have the money to challenge this in court. The police just trample on their rights. What we desperately need are for Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, perhaps other law firms, other organizations to bring a test case to re-establish what the law says, what the Constitution says, so that the police and people like Jonathan Moyer have absolutely nowhere to hide on this issue.
Thank you so much, Mr. Coltart, and also Mr. Pulu. We also want to thank Honorable Majome, who joined us earlier in the show. And of course, we want to say thank you to our listeners, our callers, our viewers, and those who wrote to us. Signing off, this is yours truly, Blessing Zulu. Of course, not forgetting our team behind the scenes, our engineers and producers.
And I'm Gibbs Dube in Washington, D.C. Good night, Zimbabwe.